Welcome back to Alabama Gristmill. It's good to have you back. I appreciate all the listeners. This is Mike Causey, and welcome to my co-host, Donna Causey.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here any day.
We're back, sharing a little anecdotes and history of Alabama. And we've got a kind of a crazy one here this week. We're talking a little about the vigilante Wild West that we had in Alabama. We weren't the West, but we had the Wild West behavior.
Oh, yeah.
We have a vigilante justice taking place in 1890 in Bibb County. So we've got a fun story to see how things were handled back then, back in those days. And it was a rough and tumble kind of era, I would say.
It was, and it had reasons for it. It was kind of in a turmoil after the Civil War to the 1900s and everything. People lost their property. There were pent up anger and frustration going on. And it devolved.
Everybody had to kind of get it settled down. They had to settle down from fighting a brother-on-brother war. Well,
the people who were running things lost all their property and all rights to vote and all kind of things going on. And there was a lot of pent up anger. You can imagine. I mean, we had a war going for 4 years, so that anger doesn't just suddenly disappear. It's there.
No. And it's a war in our backyard.
Your war in your backyard, and you get frustrated, and you lost everything you had, and so many people were killed, and there's just so many emotions going. They don't just, the war ends and it just stops. You can't erase it. It's still there, and it carries on through generations because, you think, well, it happened in the 1860s, those people died, but they had children, and the children saw this anger, and they kept it going. And it takes a while for something like that to...
It's sad to say. I mean, you still see the anger today, so you can only imagine, within a couple of years after the war was over, I mean, you still see that anger and frustration today.
You can relate it to the Revolutionary War, too. The same thing took place then. After the war, there were loyal people to Britain, and then there were people that were patriots. We call them patriots today and our founders, but they hated the royalists and all. So there was a lot of anger going on then, and it carried on for years. It had a lot of effect in our wars that went on, and states' rights were very critical, and that's what this is involved in too, is states' rights and things like that.
The other nice thing about the story I like is it's the detail. I mean,
there's a lot of detail.
Get a lot of the super detail and the people involved and what actually went down. So it's a fun one. But before we get into that, I just want to again say thank you to all the supporters. And you can support us any numerous ways through Alabama Pioneers, through the website, buying the Alabama Footprints books on Amazon or any other bookstore online. You can find them there. And becoming a patron to the AlabamaPioneers.com website. And we do take donations as well.
I was just going to say the same thing you did. If you just want to donate to the site to keep us going, you can do that through PayPal right on the site. It just goes straight to that. That's not the Patreon program. Sometimes people get a little confused. That's just a pure donation to Alabama Pioneers and what we're doing here.
Right, just a one-time type deal to go from there, because this is a small operation. We're not funded by anybody. We don't have any sponsors or anything like that. It's just us and primarily you doing the research and sharing that out to everybody the best way we know how and the best way to keep this thing going. So and we really enjoy it, but any support is appreciated because it's tough to keep all the things going and running and all that. So really, really appreciate it.
Websites are a lot more involved than you think they are. If I didn't have you to do this technical stuff, it would not be existing today.
And the bottom line is the motto we've always got is we just want to kind of share that information out there that gets lost and is not, easily to get to in an easy way.
No, it's not. It's just, it may be a letter here or something there. And you just have to, I enjoy it or I wouldn't be doing it. It's like a puzzle, putting these puzzles together. It doesn't restrict us to one side when we find these little letters here and a little letter here or a little piece here or a little piece there.
The biggest thing is we enjoy is just the community too, and hearing back from everybody and getting stories submitted to us that, somebody heard from their grandparents or heard from their relatives that, that is lost out there. that makes it even more special. So if you got any of those stories, keep those coming. We really enjoy that, and we really enjoy sharing those out.
Well, this one, like I said, this one happened in the 1890s, so there may be some stories from grandchildren. If you got a different version, or you know more about it, or you know, add to it. The more we know, I feel like the more we educate ourselves and know about these stories, the better we have a clearer understanding of our history.
That sounds like that PSA, the more you know.
Yeah, there you go. The more you
getting that bad. The more you know with a little rainbow, you know.
Right. But you got
but it gets it out there. I get you.
We have our own brains. We can make up our own mind if we have all the information. And that's what I'm trying to do, is get that information out there, not just believe what one person wrote.
That's exactly right. Well, we'll go ahead and get into that story. Enough of that type talk, or enough of that business talk.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the story about an incident of vigilante justice in Bloody Bibb County in the 1890s.
That's a strange name for a county to have, Bloody Bibb. It was kind of given that name after a news article got written out and somebody used that term, and the reporter used that term in it. And it kind of gave a lot of bad connotations. Other counties were bad too. It just happened to be that this was the name that Bibb County got. It started, like I said, with the politics and the pent-up anger and frustration going on after the Civil War. Many acts took place in Bibb County when they didn't think justice was being served correctly, because we had federal troops down here, after the Civil War, and they judged things a little bit differently. And so it's sad, but that's the way it was. There was a seemingly random murder that took place in the small town of Randolph, near the Shelby County line, that had far-reaching consequences, though. This one went all the way out to Louisiana and even to Oregon. What happened that one summer day, according to this version that was written, and there are different versions about what the actual incidents took place. Another said it was a murder, but we'll go into by this one because a lot of historians go with it. A summer day happened in 1890 when an argument took place between W.B. Bud Head and his former tenant farmer, James Tate, over the return of a $12 shotgun. This is the version that Ben Windham, Tuscaloosa News, wrote about in February 22nd edition of their newspaper in 2004. And if you've got a different version, please add it. But anyway, let's get back to the story. Tate claimed he owned the gun. He refused to return it. And the argument escalated, and Tate shot and killed Head. And so Tate knew he was in trouble, so he fled the county and just one step ahead of the bloodhounds. And Head's family was outraged, of course, and they advertised a reward for Tate's capture. Well, word spread all over the place. There were a lot of people from Bibb County, believe it or not, settled in Louisiana. So word reached R.H. Jones, who happened to be a former Bibb County resident, and he was the sheriff of Jackson Parish, Louisiana. And they discovered Tate had fled there. Maybe he had some relatives in the area that he was going to. Well, Sheriff Jones captured Tate and wired the authorities in Bibb County that he'd be returning him, and he wanted to claim the reward, of course. Well, a friend of Head's family, Wiley Trott, went to Louisiana to identify Tate and be sure he had the right person before they paid the reward. And he decided to remain to accompany the sheriff back with the prisoner to Bibb County by train. So they got on the train and made their long trek back to Alabama. The Bibb County, Alabama citizens were very outraged because Head had been a prominent citizen in the area, and when Tate shot him, they were very upset. So they talked among themselves and began to mass among themselves, and word spread as he got closer to Randolph, the depot. Sheriff Jones got the word that a vigilante mob, would be waiting at the Randolph depot. So he was advised to get off the opposite side of the train to avoid the crowd. And as he got off, he was shot, and the mob took over. They were ready to lynch him. They were so angry at what had happened. They didn't want to wait around for the court situation to take place and for him to go through a trial. The mob removed Tate's shackles and took him away to administer their own justice, which was kind of common back then because they didn't trust the legal system at the time. A porter claimed he saw Wiley Trott pull the trigger that killed Sheriff Jones, and he saw Head's friends take him away. It was believed that Tate was lynched and thrown down a well. Well, everybody, massed around and talked about it more and more. And Trott was arrested. And according to the newspaper, there were 2 witnesses saying he did it, but they were afraid to testify. Because you can imagine, here the mob had already killed Sheriff Jones and taken Tate away, so they didn't want to be part of that themselves. A news article said that James Tate's remains were found in a cave with his handcuffs on. So the word got out to the governor, and he became very upset. He tried to figure out, Governor Jones at the time, he became involved, and he offered a $1,000 reward for the members of that mob who had killed Sheriff Jones and had killed James Tate and taken the matter into their own hands. He tried to stop some of this vigilante government going on, as they called it back then. Rumors spread that many prominent families were involved in the incident at Randolph. So the sheriff of Bibb County was kind of slow to investigate the situation himself. He already, a sheriff from Louisiana got killed. I guess he didn't want to get killed either. You're one person against a whole mob. It's kind of dangerous. Finally, they had to get some private detectives from Chicago to work through the facts, because he kind of was hesitant to go further into the situation. Trott and several other men were finally indicted after the detectives came through, and some of the men were arrested and taken to Birmingham jail because they didn't feel like they would be safe there in Randolph. But most of the other men remained at large. Trott's first trial ended in a mistrial, and so he was tried again in 1892 and found guilty at that time. It was said that he whipped out a penknife in the courtroom and tried to cut his throat when the sentence was read, because he just was so devastated by what had happened. And people get so emotionally involved, and they do things that they normally wouldn't do, and that's what happens a lot of times in vigilante groups. He was sentenced to life, but he managed to escape. A follow-up story in the Hamilton Times of November 1893 stated that Willie Trott and Tap Sprouse and John Worthington escaped the county jail, telling of it. So we do know that he did escape. It was said that they were in the yard bathing, in other words, had time out in the yard, and went into the jail hospital after water, and they failed to return, and an hour later they were missing and counted as missing, so somebody probably helped them out of the jail. It's thought they escaped by means of a false key through the hospital, as all the doors were found locked. Trott was under a life sentence for the murder, of course. Trott had taken an appeal, and Sprouse was a noted moonshiner. He was not involved in the original trial. He shot Deputy Marsh Jackson in DeKalb County. Worthington was charged with assault with intent to murder policeman Albright, and no trace was ever found of the trio after they escaped the Birmingham jail. This story is also recounted in Dr. Rhoda Coleman Ellison's book of Bibb County, Alabama, the first 100 years, and it was written up in the Alabama Heritage magazine. But it kind of gives us an indication of what vigilante justice was like then.
Well, it was truly crazy, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's sad in a lot of ways that all that took place, but Bibb County was not alone. That just... No,
not at all. And it was, it's the way you handle justice in that way, but not necessarily the correct way.
Yeah, it's not the correct way. The people were taking matters into their own hands, and they had done that since the Civil War because, like I said, they lost so many of the prominent people in town that ran things, that ran the government and all. They lost their positions, and there was anger, frustration, and it was just all a combination of everything. And then we were gradually getting back into a civil society, and this was taking place in the transition. You get in a mob situation, you lose all thinking sometime, and that's what happened.
It definitely goes to extreme, and everybody just starts piling on, and it makes it a lot worse than it should be, or, less civilized than it should be, for sure. You get caught
up in emotion. I think everybody's been in a situation where you get...
And even good people.
Yeah, even good people. You never do something in your life like that, and then all of a sudden you're caught up and somebody says something, and, you know what, you're following the tracks of what you never do in life. You don't think about it anymore. You have to watch situations like that. That's why we got to live by a nation of laws.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this episode up. I hope everybody's having a great holiday vacation during the holiday season. And
yeah, and if you got additional information about this story, go ahead and share it. I'd love to hear. We'd love to hear more.
Please do. I mean, because some of you probably have heard this one because it's fairly recent in a relation to what other stories we take care of. But we'll have more stories like this and more stories over this Alabama bicentennial year and the next year coming up. So.
Yes, we will.
And we'll go ahead and let Red Foley play us out with a little Alabama Jubilee. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Joe dancing round on his toes, throws away his crutch and hollers, hey, let her go, oh honey, hey.